Story number one has to be out of Atlanta. We finally got a long, extended look at Michael Penix. The Michael Penix era is indeed underway. It got underway in one of the softest possible spots, right? Home against the Giants. The defense was dominant as expected. So Michael Penix wasn't really pushed, wasn't really needed. Final stat line, 18 of 27, 202 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, which wasn't his fault. We'll get to that in a second. Falcons called 30 dropbacks against 33 running back carries. Evan, what was your initial impression of Michael Penix's first NFL start?
Yeah, it didn't measure up to fantasy expectations, but that's going to happen when your team scores 2 pick sixes and Bijan gets, the 2 rushing touchdowns, which was one of your fears going in, and that did come to fruition. But I thought that Michael Penix looked great. The Falcons were running boot action plays again. That's not something they could do with Kirk Cousins due to his complete lack of mobility. I thought that Michael Penix was really decisive. And this was a huge win, quietly a huge win for the Falcons because the Bucs lost to Dallas. So they are technically tied atop the NFC South right now, the Bucs and the Falcons. And the Falcons swept the Bucs during the regular season, so they have a big tiebreaker. But I feel a lot better about the Falcons offense right now than I did a week ago with Michael Penix under center.
They did lose Drake London to a hamstring injury during this game. Does not sound serious. They're calling Drake London day to day. We'll see there. I just wanted to say, though, on Drake London, change the quarterback, doesn't matter. 23 routes for Drake London, 8 targets on those routes. So Michael Penix, Kirk Cousins, whatever, Drake London is the featured player there. This Kyle Pitts play, man, this just encapsulates Kyle Pitts' last couple seasons. Simple out pattern near the goal line. Pitts kind of like bobbles it and then just throws it to the Giants for an interception. Like, it's one play, it's a mistake in a career, at least since his rookie year, laden with mistakes. So the Kyle Pitts stuff is just bottoming out right now. As Evan said, Falcons now lead the NFC South, control their own destiny. Massive, massive game for the Falcons against the Commanders on Sunday Night Football this week. Penix versus Jaden Daniels. That will be a good one.
I don't know if you saw it. It was like about a week and a half ago. An article came out from Bob McGinn, longtime writer for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. He now does something with Ty Dunn called the golong.com. And he had an article talking about how Kyle Pitts is like one of the most quoting scouts, talking about how Kyle Pitts is one of the most disappointing players that those guys have scouted. Everyone was super high on him. The Falcons drafted him ahead of Penei Sewell, who's maybe the best offensive lineman in the league, and Jamar Chase, who's like the best receiver in the league. So that is a huge, huge whiff. And I think that we can say right now, after kind of debating it over the last couple of years, like Kyle Pitts is looking like a big bust right now.
Oh, yeah. Story number 2 comes from Kansas City. Just 6 days after sustaining what the Chiefs called a high ankle sprain, Patrick Mahomes plays, and doesn't just play in this game, runs 5 times for 33 yards and a touchdown. I thought he was relatively mobile in the pocket against a good Texans pass rush. Chiefs moved to 14-1 in a game they led wire to wire. That was the first big news, just Mahomes looking good off the ankle. The second big news, Evan, was the return of Hollywood Brown. This was Hollywood's first game since that scary SC joint injury. Hollywood Brown only ran 15 routes on 46 Mahomes dropbacks, but 8 targets on those 15 routes for Hollywood Brown. And he was in the slot a lot. I will never know, but I maintain that Hollywood Brown was going to be one of the best 8th, 9th, 10th round draft picks that you were going to get this year. We'll never know. But this was certainly a big boost for his outlook, rest of way, etc. Evan, what do you think of Mahomes off the ankle and Hollywood Brown's return?
Yeah, I think that this was the most complete offensive performance that the Chiefs have turned in all season, and that's against a really talented Texans defense. They ran the ball well, particularly with Kareem Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Xavier Worthy is coming. They have like a big rotation at receiver. They play like 5 guys at receiver. Xavier Worthy is atop the heap, though. Xavier Worthy is playing really, really well, coming on down the stretch of his rookie season. Matt Nagy was talking about Xavier Worthy's progression and how it reminds him like almost identical to the progression of Rashee Rice down the stretch of his rookie season. But they're getting the ball to Xavier Worthy consistently. He's the only full-time receiver in the receiver core. And he's gotten to a point where, he's been a difference maker the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, you mentioned the Kareem Hunt versus Pacheco stuff. Kareem Hunt played way more than I thought that he would in this game. And I was thinking they have it pretty much locked up now. They're like 90+% to be the number one seed in the AFC. If they want to take it easy on Isaiah Pacheco and save him for the playoffs, and I do think Pacheco gives them more, and they're going to need it in the playoffs, I guess you could see more Kareem Hunt here over the next couple of games. They do play on on Wednesday this week, tomorrow, which maybe was in their head as well. But I no longer feel like really good saying Pacheco is going to be cleanly ahead of Kareem Hunt. Any thoughts on that split?
I don't either. My sense is that it was a hot hand situation, but that could be the case moving forward. They could stick with the hot hand. I thought that by now Isaiah Pacheco would have kind of lapped Kareem Hunt, but that is not the case. And if Kareem Hunt is running well, and he really played well both in the running and the passing game against the Texans, he deserves those opportunities.
Yeah, Chiefs play Steelers and Broncos their next two games. They just need to win one of those to officially clinch the number one seed. Third story comes out of Houston. Texans go to Kansas City for that Saturday game. They lose 27-19, but the big story was sad story. Tank Dell finally breaking out. Finally realizing some of the opportunity and expectation that has been there all season for him. Catches a touchdown. On the touchdown, gruesome knee injury, dislocated kneecap, torn ACL. Joins Steph Diggs on the sideline now. Devastating blow for Tank Dell. Devastating blow for the Texans, who have very, very little behind him at wide receiver. Evan, what do you think of the Tank Dell situation and any other Texans thoughts?
Yeah, really scary situation during the game. The players on the sideline, particularly C.J. Stroud, were emotional. Tank Dell has been through a lot. He got shot last offseason, that broken leg as a rookie, and now dislocated kneecap and torn ACL and further damage. It sounds like he is not going to be ready for week 1 next year, and he may have to start the season on reserve PUP. The Texans claimed Deontay Johnson off waivers from Baltimore. And I think that they're going to need to use him right away, assuming that his mental is in the right spot, because he's kind of gone off the rails here. They can use him right away.
Yeah. I think they're going to get John Mechie back from his shoulder injury. I don't know if they're going to be able to get Deontay Johnson ready to play here in this game immediately tomorrow, Wednesday. But behind Nico Collins, they have Robert Woods, Xavier Hutchinson, and John Mechie. One thing that they can do is even more Dalton Schultz, right? And Dalton Schultz did have 8 targets on 39 CJ Stroud attempts here. It's not like Dalton Schultz plays the same role as Tank Dell, none of that stuff, but at least there's more targets to go around. And so I'd feel better about starting Dalton Schultz here than I would maybe previously as a streamer. Daigle and I also talked about Chigakonkwo as a tight end streamer for championship week 2. But yeah, without Deontay Johnson ready to go, it's going to be messy here for Stroud, I think, unless Nico can really get off. Let's go to number 4 story, Detroit Lions. So Lions, for the rare outside game, and they've played almost every one of their games in a dome this year. This one was outside, and they still shredded on offense. Now, this was the first game without David Montgomery, and the expected usage bump on Jahmyr Gibbs was real. Season high 23 carries. I think it was 6 carries inside the 10-yard line, which he would not have gotten, I don't think, if David Montgomery was healthy. 151 total yards. Jahmyr Gibbs didn't even break one. The longest play from scrimmage for Jahmyr Gibbs was 12 yards, and he still had around 25 fantasy points depending on your format. So total freak as expected. We didn't see a lot of Craig Reynolds. We didn't see any of Vaki or anything like that. Evan, what'd you think of the Lions in their first game without David Montgomery?
Yeah, because their defense has just been shredded by injuries. They are going to continue to have to just outscore their opponent. That sounds basic enough. But, they're going to have to lean on their offense to win games. This was like the best. We'll get to the Bears, but this was like the best offensive performance that they've had. One of the best of all season. And, you saw how dead they had looked for the previous several weeks. So shootout team, Jamison Williams is balling. I mean, you see Antoine Randall, their receivers coach, running with him down the sideline on the 82-yard touchdown. They love this kid, man. I mean, Dan Campbell has had his back from day one. He's another guy who's been through a lot. And he's really, really showing up. 7 targets, 5 for 143 and a touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown is over 1,000 yards and 100 catches on the season. Everyone was talking about the play that led to the fake fumble, I guess, would you call it?
Yeah.
Or the fake stumble and fake fumble that led to the Sam Laporta touchdown. This was they were dominant offensively, and they're going to have to be to beat the teams to beat teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that the downstream effect of David Montgomery being out, and we talked about this last week, when you remove someone like David Montgomery, who has such a big role and such a big red zone role, you can start to feel better about playing Laporta, about playing Jamison Williams, about playing guys like that who were maybe a bit thinner before, because you're just removing the touchdown equity from David Montgomery. And then with the stuff on defense, like Evan talked about, they need to score 35 points in a game to expect to win. And so they're going to be pushed and they're going to have their foot on the gas the whole way. So you could not draw up better spots, Bengals, Lions. Lions this week play the 49ers. That's going to be one of the best game environments of the entire week. Fifth story of the week comes from Cleveland. So Browns bench Jameis Winston. They wanted to get a look at Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and it went roughly as expected. They scored 6 points, 6, against a bad Cincinnati defense. DTR attempted 34 passes in this game. That turned into 154 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Did hurt his calf here. He is expected to be fine and start against the Dolphins in week 17. But I don't think any surprises, Evan. We talked about the DTR situation last week. Every chance he's had at the NFL level in the regular season and even the preseason has been rough to watch. Any more thoughts on DTR? And then I do want to get to the Jerome Ford stuff.
They're starting him again.
Yep.
So Jameis Winston, by the way, is dealing with some sort of an injury. I believe it's shoulder. But yeah, I mean, they're going right back to DTR. DTR did have a nice history with David Njoku from last year. And David Njoku was the one pass catcher who got some things done in this game. 10 targets, 8 for 66. But hard to be optimistic about anybody else. I mean, Jameis Winston sits down and Jerry Jeudy goes back to being an absolute nobody. Went 2 for 20 on 3 targets against the Bengals.
Yeah, by the way, David Njoku got a lot of that in garbage time, like Evan said. But then after the game, he had to go for an MRI. I believe it was on his knee. So we'll be watching the David Njoku status also. But given David Njoku came to this game with a hamstring injury and he had DTR at quarterback, certainly a surprising, at least to me, result for Njoku. The Jerome Ford stuff. So he lost goal line work to Deontay Foreman. And man, I don't know if you saw the YouTube comments last week, Evan. I made the mistake of actually looking. I meant to say Deontay Foreman. I said Dearness Johnson. And people went berserk on me.
Nuts.
Lost
it.
Lost it.
One guy said terrible analysis.
Which turned out to, I understand I got the name wrong, but Deontay Foreman got a goal line carrier too in this game, which hurt Jerome Ford. Now, I still think Jerome Ford obviously is very efficient. He's very good in the pass game. 5 catches from DTR for 39 yards is very good. He did have a 66-yard run early. Jerome Ford did to finish with 11.92-1. So we talked about Jerome Ford a bunch last week. I played him a bit in DFS, which was nice. Would have been nicer if every other running back didn't go off also. But yeah, I'm okay, I guess, starting Jerome Ford here against the Dolphins in week 17. Any more thoughts on him, Evan?
He's got big playability and he's good in the passing game. There's really no, other than the offensive environment, which definitely, creates trepidation about him. I mean, he's the kind of guy that we want to play in fantasy because of that explosive ability and the ability in the passing game. Deontay Foreman in this game, a.k.a. Dearness Johnson in this game, lost a fumble that led directly to a Bengals touchdown. So I don't think that we're going to be seeing a whole lot of Deontay Foreman. I mean, they obviously aren't high on him. He had been inactive up until this point. I think it should be the Jerome Ford show the rest of the way.
All right. Go alphabetical through the NFC right now. We'll start with Arizona. I mean, it feels redundant at this point, but yet another disappointing Kyler Murray game and another disappointing Marvin Harrison game in a disappointing season. You lose to the Panthers and now are officially eliminated from the playoffs, are the Arizona Cardinals. From a fantasy perspective, the big news was James Conner injury. I mean, incredible season. He was absolutely smashing in the first half. James Conner had 27 points on DraftKings with like 2 minutes left in the first half. Hurts his knee, doesn't return. Now that the Cardinals are eliminated from the playoffs, I'd be surprised if we saw James Conner the rest of the way. Trey Benson has been dealing with an ankle injury. Emari DeMercado is done, which all leads me to Michael Carter, who I guess is okay in the passing game, or that's his calling card, but he's bounced around a bunch and has not gotten a lot of opportunities. Have any thoughts on Michael Carter going forward, or any other Cardinals thoughts as their season is officially over?
Yeah, my hope is that we can see Trey Benson in that role. I mean, he was a pretty high draft pick. I think it was early third round pick, number 66 overall. He was a guy that a lot of sharp analysts, draft analysts thought might be the best running back in the entire draft class. They did not place him on IR with the ankle. So that suggests to me that he's more day-to-day. And so hopefully we can get him in that lead role. By the way, the Cardinals already have ruled out both of their starting offensive tackles for Week 17. Paris Johnson out with a knee, Jonah Williams out with a knee, and one of their guards, Evan Brown, has been dealing with a neck injury. So they are really banged up front. But, I mean, really disappointing season for Kyler Murray all in all. And we're already starting – I mean, I'm already starting to see, like, talk about maybe the Cardinals bringing in competition for him in the offseason.
Yeah, he was, we talked about it last week. He was not good in that game in week that they won in week 15, and then again struggled in week 16 here. Yeah, and just on the team getting eliminated, we see this every year. The game after a team gets eliminated officially from the playoffs, you start to see things happen like Evan talked about. Oh, both our tackles were playing hurt. They're just going to shut it down. James Conner's banged up. They're just going to shut it down. And so certainly watching that on teams that get eliminated and then have a game the next week. The Marvin Harrison stuff, Evan, I don't know, man. 4.39-0 on 8 targets. Just doesn't seem like he's fighting for the ball or fighting well for the ball. 1.57 yards per route run this season as the number one target for Kyler Murray at the wide receiver position. 1.57 is worse than Jalen Coker, worse than Keon Coleman. I mean, he is not going to look good in any underlying year 2 model data whatsoever. What is your final, outlook here on Marvin Harrison as the Cardinals season is over?
I think that his ability to win, like just be a ball winner, has not been there this year. I think he runs good routes. He certainly looks the part. I go back to Robert Mays made the comparison between Marvin Harrison and DK Metcalf. And I don't think that Marvin Harrison runs quite like DK Metcalf. I'm not chalking up his career or anything like that, but they're going to have to figure out different ways to use him. I believe Drew Petzing, the OC, because he has not been a positive for the Cardinals offense overall.
Absolutely. Let's go to the Carolina Panthers. Panthers get a huge game from Chuba Hubbard here. Bryce Young, again, made some big-time throws. They beat those Cardinals in overtime for their 4th win of the season. I guess from like a fairness perspective in fantasy, I was happy to see the Chuba Hubbard people get rewarded. One mistake that I made this year of many was I had a full fade on Jonathan Brooks. I know Evan did too. But I didn't draft much Chuba Hubbard, even though he was so cheap. And so if I was going to go for the full Brooks fade, I probably should have taken some Chuba Hubbard as leverage there. But Chuba was a great pick for the people who took him, carried teams all year. And here against the Cardinals, gets 29 more touches, goes off for 30 fantasy points. Evan, what did you think of Panthers' overtime win over the Cardinals?
Yeah, I saw a lot of people doing Bryce Young victory laps after this one. Like, and bringing up the old tweets about, how he looked like a bust, which was all true at the time. But, this was the Chuba Hubbard show. I mean, Bryce Young played really well. He was PFF's number 1 graded quarterback on the week. But this was the Chuba Hubbard show. 25 carries, 4 catches, 152 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. I mean, he has been excellent for Carolina all season. And with the way that, Jonathan Brooks now has 2 ACL tears in the same knee, Chuba Hubbard's going to open the season as a starter next year.
No Xavier Legette in this game. I thought it was a pretty decent spot for all 3 wide receivers. They scored 36 points. Bryce Young plays well, and no wide receiver went over 43 yards, which is really weird. Now, one thing they did was a lot of 2 tight end sets with Jatavian Sanders and Tommy Tremble. So Thielen snaps were down a bit. The 2 wide receiver set was mostly David Moore and Jalen Coker. But this spot coming up against the Bucs is a really good one here for Thielen, Coker, and David Moore. I would not hesitate to play Adam Thielen if I had to in a fantasy championship game. The matchup is just so good, and obviously Bryce is playing better, but we'll also have to see on Xavier Legette's status.
One more bright spot for Carolina coming out of this, which looked like it was going to be a horrible year to start, but it's turned out to be fairly promising, is the offensive line. They have a bunch of young players up there. Remember they paid a ton of money for those guards. They've got Ike Ekwonu, Taylor Moton. Like, that's a building block for Carolina entering next season. And in addition to Chuba Hubbard's tough running, I mean, they can open holes up front, and all those guys are coming back.
Let's go to the Chicago Bears. So I thought it was similar to the Thanksgiving game that the Bears and Lions played. Caleb and the Bears struggled early, and then they got hot. I mean, a lot of it late, some of it in garbage time, but they got real hot, and the final box score looks great as the Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen double hit. He keeps doing this, Evan, where like he plays bad in the first quarter, Caleb does, and then he just plays well enough to kind of get there in fantasy the rest of the way. What'd you think of Bears game against the Lions?
Yeah, and the Sims were high on the Bears, and like I've always said, trust the Sims. You think you know, you have no idea. The Sims know. Trust the Sims. Play whatever they tell you to play.
That's good.
But they dude, Tevin Jenkins, their starting left guard, was like limping through warmups. They lost Braxton Jones, their left tackle, to a broken leg. Keenan Allen, his long touchdown was like I think it was a coverage bust by the Lions. That's what's going to happen when you got a bunch of backups out there playing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't like feel any better about the Bears offense right now. Even after they had a fairly good performance on paper and, won some people some money in DFS.
Yeah, and I'm really struggling on a weekly basis to figure out who I prefer between Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. Last week I preferred DJ Moore, and Keenan was certainly the guy there. Keenan does seem to have a bit more touchdown equity than DJ Moore does at this point. But one of the reasons the Bears project so well is because they're really only throwing to 3 guys. And like their defense, the Bears defense at this point is so bad, they get into these wild scripts too. So interesting spot home against Seattle next for the Bears. Cowboys. So this was a Sunday night game. Bucs really needed this game. Tampa really needed this game. And the Cowboys went out and won it. I mean, outside of that first Eagles game where Cooper Rush really face planted when Dak was out, Cooper Rush has been good, or fine at least, solid NFL backup. And in a matchup where the plan had to be to throw against the Bucs and throw, he executed well. And you see CD strong. You see Ferguson lead the team with 9 targets. So competent, solid NFL backup for sure. And Cooper Rush, Evan, what'd you think of Cowboys game Sunday night against the Bucs?
Yeah, I mean, one of the best backups in the league. I mean, we've got a decent enough sample size. I think he's got like 10 career starts or something, about 10 to 12. And I mean, he absolutely can keep the offense moving. He can get the ball to CD, get the ball to Jake Ferguson. They're still dealing with some issues on the offensive line, and their lack of weapons has been a thing all season long. But Cooper Rush, really solid backup, no question. CD Lamb, he's got this AC joint thing that, you've talked about it before, how it can be a recurring injury. You fall on it wrong, like it flares back up. And that happened in this game. Yeah. The Cowboys got eliminated from playoff contention in this game.
Yeah.
So, I would be worried that they might sit CD.
Yeah, that's something to watch for sure there. And also they're going back and have to play the Eagles again this week, this time in Philadelphia. And that's the spot where I mentioned Cooper Rush face planted. So if you're looking for reasons not to play Cowboys, that could certainly add to the list there. Packers. This was the game last night. I mean, this was the easiest spot that you could possibly find for the Packers. Home, night game in Lambeau against the Saints JV team. They were like 14.5-point favorites. They win 34-0. It was, in fact, was so easy. And the Packers have such a huge game coming up against the Vikings. The Packers actually rested Josh Jacobs for like most of the game. I mean, Josh Jacobs was going to go for like 40 points if they didn't rest him or if the Saints played better. I mean, he was going to go absolutely nuclear. But they have their eye on this Vikings game coming up due the Packers here, so they rested him. Evan, what do you think of Packers' very easy win over the Saints last night?
Yeah, and I like that Emmanuel Wilson came in and gave them some good snaps. Chris Brooks had some nice runs. Malik Willis got in the game. This is just an all-out domination. And as you mentioned, good timing with a huge game on deck against Minnesota, but not a ton of takeaways because of the blowout nature of the result.
Yeah, I mean, Packers can't get above the 5th seed, but they're trying to figure out if they're going to have the 5 seed, the 6 seed, or the 7 seed. And I think that matters whether you go to Minnesota or you might have to go to Washington or something like that and get a much easier spot there. Christian Watson got hurt in this game. They were worried it was something serious. Went for an MRI, came back this morning. Sounds like it's just a bruise on Christian Watson. So hopefully he'll be okay for that game against the Vikings. Rams go to East Rutherford to play the Jets, and they win in an unexpected way. Defense and a lot of Kyren Williams. I mean, they held the Jets to just 9 points. Rams win 19-9 on a day Matthew Stafford attempted a season-low 19 passes. 19 passes for Matthew Stafford in a game they win. Evan, what do you think of Rams game at Jets?
Yeah, we learned just before the game that Quinnen Williams was going to be out for the Jets, and the Rams attacked the Jets up the middle and just had success running the ball all day long. And Matthew Stafford had 110 passing yards. Puka Nacua was my pull-up play. A miracle that he had 8 catches.
Yeah.
But yeah, nobody else really did anything because they didn't have to do anything. Smooth sailing win over the Jets for the Rams.
It's getting really wide between Puka and Cooper Kupp lately. Last 4 games, Puka Nacua 39 targets, Cooper Kupp 20. I mean, I didn't think that it would get that wide that fast, but Puka is incredible, and Kupp is clearly slowing down to some degree. Also, Tyler Higbee made his season debut in this game off the knee reconstruction. He played 14 snaps, only ran 6 routes. On those 6 routes, Tyler Higbee did get a touchdown. So shout out to Tyler Higbee making it back from the ACL here for the late season push and scoring a touchdown. They have a game home against the Cardinals next for the Rams. Let's go to the Vikings. Vikings go into Seattle and rack up their 13th win of the season. Really entertaining game. Sam Darnold was impressive again. 3 more touchdowns. No interceptions for Sam Darnold. Darnold now 4th in passer rating on the entire year. This team is 13-2, man. I mean, 13-2 with Sam Darnold at quarterback. Evan, what do you think of Vikings' latest win this time in Seattle?
Darnold was freaking dialed in this game. I mean, the touchdown throw to Justin Jefferson down the left sideline was incredible. I mean, this offense is locked in right now, and I'm not even kidding. People are starting to come out and talk about their writers are starting to come out and talk about their MVP ballots. If I had a top 3 right now, I would have Josh Allen 1, Lamar Jackson 2, and Sam Darnold 3. I mean, that's how well he has played consistently. You know, you remember he had like one bad game. I want to say it was against the Jets or something like that. He has been incredible all season long. This is what he was supposed to be coming out of USC, and it's been unlocked by Kevin O'Connell and all the weapons that they have. I mean, they can really, really score. They're really good on defense too. But they are a legitimate, dangerous team. I can't wait for Minnesota Green Bay.
Yeah, you remember that game where Justin Jefferson did like nothing and Jordan Addison and Hawkinson went off? Since then, Justin Jefferson has gone off and carried teams to the finals, right? And it helps Justin Jefferson when teams have to respect Addison and Hawkinson, who are playing so well. So yeah, Justin Jefferson back to absolutely carrying fantasy teams right
Absolutely. And Sam Darnold, last 6 games, 15 touchdowns, 1 interception.
Let's go to the Giants. Giants go back to Drew Lock here. They lose 34-7, embarrassing fashion to Falcons defense. Michael Penix, Falcons defense just broke the slate on Drew Lock with 25 points. If you need a streamer for this week, Diggle and I talked about Colts, who get to play Drew Lock here this week. Drew Lock is just not an NFL quarterback, not even a backup NFL quarterback. One thing you can say, Evan, is that the Malik Neighbors targets are just wild. I mean, 14 more targets here from Malik Neighbors, leads entire NFL with 154. But it's like, what is the target worth to Malik Neighbors at this point? It's so short. They're so unlikely to score a touchdown. His targets are just not worth that much, but he certainly has an awesome floor here. What do you think of Drew Lock's latest meltdown for the Giants?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, it shouldn't be this bad for him. Even behind, a bad offensive line with all kinds of issues. Just it should not be this bad. And Brian Dable, I think, is going to get fired after the season. I think that so a lot of changes coming for the Giants.
Yeah.
I don't have any great notes. Tommy, I think that, Drew Lock did have an MRI on his right shoulder, his throwing shoulder. So maybe we'll see DeVito next week.
Yeah. Either way, Colts defense is certainly the play. The only other note that I had at running back, 36 snaps for Tyrone Tracy, 13 for Devin Singletary. You saw what Tyrone Tracy can do as a receiver. Catches that ball at the back of the end zone, one hand, toe tap. I mean, that's stuff that wide receivers can't do, and Tyrone Tracy was doing that in the back of the end zone there. So he's a legit good fantasy prospect given the way he plays in the passing game. If they can get the quarterback situation settled, if they have the number 1 pick, they'll likely have their choice between Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. I haven't looked at that stuff that closely yet, but they're going to be positioned to take whoever they want, clearly.
Cam Ward. I think they should go Cam Ward. One more note, Puka Nacua set the NFL record for rookies for receptions, for rookie year receptions last year.
Yeah.
Malik Neighbors needs 9 catches over the final 2 weeks to break that record.
And he missed 2 games.
Yeah. But that'll be something that they're gunning for, hopefully.
Saints last night, I literally have no notes. I mean, I am embarrassed for the Saints. It's like the JV team is out there. Spencer Rattler has even if you wanted to evaluate Spencer Rattler, I'm not sure that you can even evaluate him. MVS didn't even play last night. I mean, they have absolutely no one. Kevin Austin wasn't even a good UFL player or USFL player. And he's out there running every route. You also saw weird stuff where Kendry Miller played a bunch in the first half, and then he lost a bunch of playing times like Jordan Mims. You would think they'd want to get a longer look at Kendry Miller. So I don't know, man. It is real bad right now for the Saints. Any thoughts on their game last night?
I also am devoid of notes on the Saints. I mean, it's just, some of these teams, you reach you're nearing the finish line. You got a million injuries. There's just no real good takeaways, to discuss.
I'll just say, if both Rizzi and Dennis Allen turn out to not really like Kendry Miller, it's a bad sign. It's a bad sign that everybody hates this guy. But yeah, let's go to Eagles. So Jalen Hurts sustained a concussion, exits after just 12 snaps. Eagles forced to go to Kenny Pickett, end up losing a wild game. I mean, this defense gave up 36 points to the Commanders, lose 36-33. Does Kenny Pickett. We will see if Jalen Hurts can get cleared by Sunday. Eagles are basically cooked for the number 1 seed now, but they still need to win to ensure the number 2 seed. Evan, what did you think of Eagles game here and Kenny Pickett?
Kenny Pickett is not good. I think we can say that solidly. And he also I think he was hurt because he needed x-rays on his ribs after the game. If no Jalen Hurts and no Kenny Pickett, the Eagles' next quarterback up is Tanner McKee, a big statue out of Stanford. I think that they'll probably do whatever they possibly can to get Jalen Hurts through the concussion protocol.
Yeah,
but they're banged up, obviously, at quarterback. Saquon Barkley needs 268 rushing yards over the final 2 games to break Eric Dickerson's all-time single-season rushing record. He's got Dallas and the Giants.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something that he can do. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that they're going to find that important?
I I think if he wants it, they'll find it important. But you remember that game earlier in the year, he had a chance to break some records. Sirianni asked him if he wanted to go back in for some garbage time. He said, "No, let the young kids eat." So we'll see. It would be a cool record, I think, to have. If I was Barkley, I probably would want to have it if it was close. By the way, ESPN, I tweeted this chart from ESPN. They have the Eagles 97% to be the number 2 seed. So, yeah. And then obviously, I think that assumes Jalen Hurts is playing and they have these softish matchups here coming up. By the way, Kenny Pickett attempted 24 passes in this game. 20 of them were at A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith or Dallas Scott or Devonta Smith. No Dallas Goedert. Wide receiver 3 spot is a mess. So 20 out of Pickett's 24 passes went to A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. I mean, that's good. That is good for stacking.
You know who they really could have used in this game who was playing for the other team was Olamide Zaccheaus.
Indeed. Shout out.
It used to play for the Eagles. That's why I mentioned that.
49ers. So 49ers playing out the string here. They go to Miami and lose 29-17. Debo finally did Debo things. Caught a ball at like the 4-yard line. There's like 3 guys around him. He like drags them into the end zone. And that's like the kind of efficiency and special plays that Debo needs to make for him to pay off. So it was good to see him at least alive here. Too late for the 49ers, of course, but maybe not too late for DFS or any of their fantasy stuff. But yeah, they're playing out the string, Evan, and like their guys are playing. You know, Kittle's out there playing, Juwan Jennings is out there playing, Debo's out there playing, and Patrick Taylor's role was pretty good. He played 51 of 64 snaps here, did Patrick Taylor. Evan, what do you think of 49ers game in Miami?
Yeah, I mean, these dudes love to play. You know, George Kittle loves to play. 8 for 106. This has been the best season of his career from a receiving standpoint.
Yeah.
George Kittle, and wound up being a steal in fantasy drafts. People were kind of like lukewarm on him for some reason this year. At the end of the day, he's an absolute stud. I saw at one point Ricky Pearsall, who had 4 for 37 on 4 targets, but he committed multiple penalties. And the 49ers wide receivers coach Leonard Hankerson was just chewing him out on the sideline. I don't know. He'll be an interesting eval as we go into the 2025 fantasy season. Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah, I mean, really good matchup and game environment coming up here for the 49ers. They play the Lions at home. We already talked about how the Lions can set up crazy shootouts. Given the way the 49ers are playing, that could be a really, really good game for fantasy. Seahawks. Really tough loss for the Seahawks here, home to the Vikings. I mean, Geno Smith plays through the knee injury. I thought played reasonably well enough to win, but throws a late interception. There's a video out there of him like getting into it with a fan after the interception. Just tough. I mean, the Seahawks are still alive for the playoffs, but they're going to need to win and get some help. They're like 18% right now or so to make the playoffs. Evan, what do you think of Seattle's brutal loss to the Vikings at home?
Yeah, I mean, tough for them in real life. In fantasy, it was kind of nice. The Seahawks just went extreme pass heavy in this game. And it makes sense in hindsight that they would do that because the Vikings are so good in run defense, number one, and number two, because both of the Seahawks running backs were banged up entering this game. They both played, but Zach Charbonnet like didn't even play until like the third quarter or something.
Yeah.
And Kenneth Walker suffered another injury.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he's not going to play this week. He was dealing with a calf previously, suffered an ankle injury. And yeah, I would bet against him playing on Thursday night. I mean, a short week.
Exactly. And yeah, you know, Kenneth Walker, like you said, finally makes it back from the calf, turns his ankle here. It didn't seem like they had any intention of playing Zach Charbonnet here in this game because he was hurt also, but then they had to. And they get McIntosh some carries in there as well. We'll see about Zach Charbonnet's status for Thursday. If Walker is out and Charbonnet is in, you can see these 20-touch games against the Bears for Zach Charbonnet being like very profitable. So that's certainly one to keep an eye on. Other note on Seattle is just JSN is the alpha, man. I mean, despite the squeaky wheel on DK Metcalf, it was JSN 12 targets, DK Metcalf 7. JSN is just an absolute stud. Absolute stud.
Over the Seahawks' last 6 games, Geno Smith has completed 87% of his passes intended for JSN.
Yeah.
87%.
Let's go to the Bucs. Crushing loss for the Bucs in Dallas. Bucs no longer control their own destiny in the NFL playoffs, although they are still favored. I saw like minus 130 for them to get to the playoffs still because they get to play the Panthers and the Saints the last two games. Falcons have to play the Commanders and then the Panthers. But anyways, the Jalen McMillian story continues to be the breakout story to me. Ever since he got back from injury, he's really been playing well. 4 touchdowns his last 3 games. And as we mentioned a few weeks ago, they removed all these dust balls. They removed, Trey Palmer and all these other guys they were playing. And now it's just Jalen McMillan, Mike Evans, and Sterling Shepard. And Jalen McMillan's the one that is breaking out well ahead of Sterling Shepard. Evan, what do you think of Bucs' loss on Sunday night to the Cowboys?
Yeah, tough for them. I mean, I thought that Baker still played pretty darn well. You're right. I mean, if we're thinking about 2025, which I'm already starting to think about, Chris Godwin comes back, Mike Evans comes back, Jalen McMillan is your third. I mean, that you got to feel really good about that.
Mm-hmm.
Cade Otton did not play in this game. Payne Durham stepped in for him, 5 for 29 on 7 targets. I don't know what Cade Otton's status is going to be going forward. He's got a knee injury, but he's a guy who soaks up like 98% of the snaps. So,
yeah. Last note for me on the Bucs, you saw Rachaad White commit the fumble to end the game, right? So it's 2 minutes left. A massive spot for the Bucs. You would think that Bucky Irving should be in there, right? Bucky Irving's been the better back. Bucky Irving has been explosive. He's been good in the pass game, but they are very staunch that Rachaad White is their 2-minute drill back. Throw it to Rachaad White. He fumbles, game over, and now you're behind in the division. So I don't know if there'll be any punishment there, but I'd love to see Bucky get the full role and see what he can do with it, because even in a part-time role right now, he's been so impressive. Last NFC team is the Washington football team, the Commanders. Incredible win for them. I mean, I know it was against Kenny Pickett, but wild comeback to beat the rival Eagles. Technically, they keep their division title hopes alive. Jaden Daniels throws for 5 touchdowns and runs for 81 yards on a very good defense. I mean, that basically locks up offensive rookie of the year for Jaden Daniels if he didn't have it already. And honestly, man, as someone who grew up in DC, like, fans deserve this season, and they deserve Jaden Daniels because Daniel Snyder just ripped the heart out of this team for like 25 years. And for them to have the environment they had on Sunday, Jaden Daniels goes nuts. They have the offensive rookie of the year. I'm just happy for the Commanders and everybody I know back in the DC area. So anyways, Evan, what do you think of Commanders' wild win over the Eagles?
Yeah, I was born in Fairfax, lived there until I was about 12, and I still got a bunch of family in that area, and they are absolutely jacked. I mean, texting during the game and stuff. And remember Bo Nix kind of made a little run at offensive rookie of the year. Nope. Brock Bowers has had an unbelievable season. Nope. It's Jaden Daniels for sure.
For sure.
And then Terry McLaurin became the first wide receiver in Washington football history to go for over 1,000 yards in 5 seasons. And I mean, you think back, Washington has had some incredible wide receivers over the year. Remember the posse? Art Monk is a Hall of Famer. Gary Clark, Ricky Sanders, Santana Moss, Deshaun Jackson. That puts him in elite company. Terry McLaurin, 5 straight 1,000-yard seasons.
Terry McLaurin leads all wide receivers in the NFL in passer rating when thrown at. Nobody has a better passer rating when thrown at than Terry McLaurin. I'd also note Zacchaeus, who Evan mentioned earlier, popped up in this game. He ran 32 routes on 46 Jaden Daniels dropbacks. Huge game home against the Falcons next for the Commanders. Michael Penix versus Jaden Daniels should be a good one. Let's move it over to the AFC now. Start with the Baltimore Ravens. This was that game against the Steelers, which feels like ages ago now. Lamar Jackson was once again very efficient as a thrower. I mean, people just underrate how good he's been as a thrower against the Steelers. 15 of 23, 207, and 3 touchdowns, including some really nice passes. There was one to Rashad Bateman in the back of the end zone. I was like, man, that was an awesome throw. You also get the big dog game here as the Ravens move to 10-5. Evan, what did you think of Ravens' relatively easy win over the rival Steelers?
Yeah, relatively easy. There are some injury concerns for Baltimore. Zay Flowers' shoulder Rashad Bateman foot, Nelson Aguilar concussion. Justice Hill had an ugly, scary concussion in this game. Obviously a really nice win against a division rival, but they kind of paid the price.
Yeah. Mark Andrews had one touchdown. He also got targeted in the end zone on another one and just jumped a little bit too early, but he could have had another touchdown there also. And they continue to use Isaiah Likely as a wide receiver. So with all these wide receiver injuries, you could certainly see Isaiah Likely popping up for a nice game on the 2-game slate. I know there's a lot of people out there that have Ravens actually on top of their power rankings right now. Given all the Lions' defensive injuries and given the way that the Ravens have played, they're not going to be a very high seed in the playoffs. I believe that they are, let me check here. Yeah, they're very likely to be either the 3 or the 5 seed are the Ravens, but I could easily see them making a run to the Super Bowl. And I know that people don't want to hear that because Lamar's choked in the playoffs before or whatever, but he's having an awesome year. Awesome year.
Yeah. And I continue to be really impressed with the way that Todd Monken consistently incorporates Isaiah Likely. Really, he hasn't been like super consistent to the extent where we can lean on him in fantasy, but he's had a really, really nice year. I mean, he's like probably the best number 2 tight end in the NFL. And I'm curious as to why we don't hear about Todd Monken in relation to coaching staff or in the head coaching vacancies. You remember he almost got the Jets job. They went with Adam Gase. But he really is never even talked about.
Yeah.
And it's really weird to me. I kind of suspect why he's not really like a part of the cocoon. He's kind of like a different guy. But he absolutely should be, is deserving of at least mention when it comes to head coaching vacancies. And I think that we're going to have a lot of head coaching vacancies this offseason.
Let's go to the Buffalo Bills. This was a scary one for the Bills. I mean, we talked a bunch last week about how this was not the same spot for Josh Allen, right? He went for that 50 ball in a dome against the Rams when the Rams offense went nuts. He went for a 40 ball in a dome against Detroit when the Lions offense went nuts. Here, outside, division rival Patriots crash back to earth, and Josh takes down a lot of fantasy teams with him, which sucks because Josh Allen carried fantasy teams for the entire year, but it was hard to advance with a 9 from Josh Allen. Evan, what do you think of Bills' game against the Patriots?
Well, I think that he banged his throwing elbow early in the game. He was talking about how he had went through parts of the game where he had numbness in his throwing hand. So that was an issue. Amari Cooper was 4th among Bills wide receivers in route rate.
Yeah.
In this game. Remember a couple weeks ago, he had that game where he had like 270 air yards or something like that. He's been kind of a ghost ever since. I wonder if he's dealing with something.
Yeah. I also think it's hard to integrate wide receivers mid-season, man. I mean, we saw them try to do it with Deontay Johnson in Baltimore. They try to do it here with Amari Cooper. It's just hard to do it mid-season. They also are just so flat in their target projection that it's tough. The other thing that's tough about flatness in the Bills is I feel like we underproject James Cook every week, but it's really hard because Josh Allen gets a bunch of carries. Ty Johnson gets carries. Ray Davis gets carries, even in close games. I'm not talking about blowouts. Like they're playing Ty Johnson and Ray Davis a bunch in close games. So you need James Cook to break these long runs. He does it again here. 46-yard
shot
touchdown
out of
run.
A cannon in this.
Shot out of a cannon. It's just really hard to project on James Cook because that volume is just really tough to project.
You'll often see teams open the season playing big rotations, like 5 receivers, 2 or 3 backs, maybe 2 tight ends, and then they will kind of narrow those rotations down as the season progresses because guys are, earning it, outplaying other guys. Injuries happen. No, the Bills have stuck with this the entire season. They play 2 tight ends, 1 million receivers, 3 running backs. Their quarterback's a dual threat. It can definitely be frustrating in fantasy.
For sure. Bengals win their 3rd straight game. They stay alive for now in the playoff chase by moving to 7 wins and 8 losses. Of course, the Joe Burrow stuff is just ridiculous. Continues to play at an MVP level. That late 32-yard touchdown pass to Jamar Chase was massive for a lot of playoff teams. I mean, Joe Burrow now 39 touchdown passes against 8 interceptions and also leads the entire NFL in passing yards. The way their defense is playing, the way Joe Burrow is playing, obviously for the last month plus, it's been Lions and Bengals as the best fantasy spots that you can find. Evan, what do you think of Bengals' latest win to stay alive?
Well, I think that Joe Burrow, as you mentioned, having an unbelievable season. He is the first player in NFL history to have 250-plus passing yards and 3+ passing touchdowns in 7 straight games. That broke Tom Brady's record. He had 6 straight. Burrow has 7. So he's just on an absolute tear. He's had to be on a tear because their defense is so bad, although they were facing DTR this week. But another real nice workload for Chase Brown. Jamar Chase continues to go for that triple crown of receiving. T. Higgins, a nice game. I mean, this has been a really fun fantasy offense when all these dudes are healthy.
Yeah, and you see it on T. Higgins because, some games Jamar Chase 18 targets, T. Higgins 5. But a lot of them are more like this. T. Higgins 11 targets, Jamar Chase 8 or something close, or Jamar Chase slightly ahead, etc. So, T. Higgins obviously a baller. 2 tough spots to end it for Cincy. Home against Broncos and then at Steelers, but it doesn't really matter to me. Joe Burrow is going to shred no matter what.
I think we can consider them matchup proof at this point.
Broncos. This was a big Thursday night football game for the Broncos. They get out to a 21-10 lead. They're rolling. And then the offense kind of stalled out in the second half. They lose to the Chargers 34-27. Just a ton of short passes in this game from Bo Nix. 3.0 was the average depth of target for Bo Nix in this game. And that's not been the way it's been for his rookie year. I know people want to say that about him. He's been in the middle of the pack all year in ADOT. It was just this game he was throwing so short the entire game. Evan, what do you think of Broncos' loss to the Chargers last Thursday?
Well, I think that one of the bigger takeaways, and Audric Estime only had 9 for 48 and a touchdown in this game. And, I mean, he does not have a role whatsoever in the passing game. He didn't really play in the passing game at Notre Dame either. But after the game, Sean Payton was talking about how he has earned more opportunities. Sean Payton has said that before about Audric Estime, but I mean, I kind of tend to believe him at this point. I mean, they're down on Javonte Williams. Jaleel McLaughlin has been banged up. I mean, I think that they are incentivized to have Audric Estime at least lead the team in carries down the stretch.
Yeah, I wish I could believe Sean Payton. He did this with Marvin Mims too. Marvin Mims would go out and have a great game last year, and Sean Payton would say, yeah, he's awesome. We got to get him more. And then nothing, not even a bump in usage. We'll see on Jaleel McLaughlin's status. I think that matters. If Jaleel McLaughlin is out, I'd be more tempted to take the plunge on Estime. But Estime only played 13 snaps here. He had 9 carries on those 13 snaps and looked great. But it was 13 snaps for Estime, 33 for Javonte Williams, and 10 for Blake Watson. Do we really need Blake Watson snaps? It seems completely unnecessary. Very, very good matchup this week, though, at Bengals. And so we're going to have to talk more about all this stuff later in the week.
Yeah. At the end of the day, Estime is going to be extremely touchdown heavy, which I do think that he's their best option at the goal line based on his size and the way he runs. But he's going to be extremely touchdown reliant because he doesn't play at all in the passing game. And, you can't count on him getting 20 carries because they use 3 running backs.
Let's go to the Indianapolis Colts. Colts stay alive in their playoff hopes with a home win over the Titans. The final score was 38-30, but it really wasn't that close. I mean, Colts were up 31-7 a couple plays into the second half. Story, of course, was Jonathan Taylor absolutely breaking the slate. 0 targets. Anthony Richardson only attempts 11 passes. Doesn't matter when Jonathan Taylor goes 29, 218, 3 rushing. So I have concerns about Jonathan Taylor's usage on a team where Anthony Richardson steals rushing touchdowns, on a team where Anthony Richardson can't complete a pass to a running back. But Jonathan Taylor is still an extremely, extremely good runner with an awesome role. Obviously, Evan, what do you think of JT and Colts win over the Titans?
Yeah, and after running, or dropping the ball before entering the end zone last week, he just ran all the way into the tunnel this week. So, I mean, it was good for it. It was a really rough matchup on paper. I mean, you had to get pretty in your contrarian bag in DFS to convince yourself that Jonathan Taylor was a good play. He really has had a disappointing season. They're still without their starting right guard and their starting right tackle. They did get Ryan Kelly back here, their starting center. And the Titans, for the most part, have played good run defense lately, although they've gotten shredded a couple times recently. And that's what Jonathan Taylor did. He had an unbelievable game. He's dealt with ankle injuries for a lot of his career. Obviously, he's healthy now.
I have bad news, Evan. Sims really liked Jonathan Taylor this past week. He was Leone's flag plant, and
Like
actually
I've always said,
and
trust the Sims. They know.
And I played 2 Jonathan Taylor teams out of my, I think I had 8 tournament teams. Unfortunately, was not enough, but yeah. And by the way, man, I mean, Anthony Richardson, 971, 9 carries, 70 yards, 1 rushing touchdown himself. Plays the Giants this week. If you need a streamer for your season-long league, Anthony Richardson can certainly work. He's at a minimum, he's going to get you 10 or 11 points. The ceiling is off the wall. Off the wall.
People kill Anthony Richardson on Twitter all day long.
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel bad for him. I mean, I understand where it comes from, but I mean, I don't know. He's got to fix some stuff in the offseason from a passing standpoint for sure.
For sure. Jaguars. So even without Max Crosby playing for the Raiders here, Mac Jones and the Jaguars sputtered. They only managed 14 points against the Raiders. The story continues to be Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, the company that Brian Thomas Jr. is in right now, and with really bad quarterback play for a lot of it, is wild. Only 6 wide receivers have averaged more than 2.3 yards per route run as a rookie. Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown, Chris Olave, and now Brian Thomas Jr. And Brian Thomas Jr. is doing it with Mac Jones in really not a very good environment to do it at. So just you could not draw up a more exciting rookie profile than you have for Brian Thomas Jr. right now. Evan, what do you think of Jaguars' game against Las Vegas?
Yeah, Brian Thomas Jr. has double-digit targets in 4 straight games. He's been quarterback proof. I mean, he looks like he's going to be like a guy that we're talking about is maybe the best receiver in the NFL within the next few years. Brenton Strange was really disappointing in this game. He played over 80% of the snaps in week 15. Comes back, he's like a rotational player. I don't know, he got hurt or something.
Yeah, he came into the game with a shoulder issue. I think it was that AC thing that we talked about with CeeDee Lamb. And I believe he also lost a fumble. And then, yeah, just not great. Not great. Let's go to the Raiders. So they get Aiden O'Connell back in the saddle here. Leads to an 11-catch game from Brock Bowers. They beat the Jaguars. Disappointing part for me was Jacoby Myers failing. I thought he was a really solid play here with AOC back, just like Brock Bowers, really solid play with Brock Bowers back facing the Jaguars. But Jacoby's targets were really low, and a lot of it was because AOC threw so much to running backs. 7 targets for Alexander Madison and 6 for Amir Abdullah. 13 targets for those 2 backs is certainly going to hurt Bowers in some cases, and in this case, Jacoby Myers. Evan, what do you think of Raiders game against the Jags?
I think that my let's get nuts pull-up play, Amir Abdullah, kind of came through. How about that?
Great.
Huh? 12 touches, 5 catches, and a touchdown.
It was awesome for sure. And if every running back didn't score 30 points every freaking week, then those kind of games would work. But yeah.
I thought that AOC played pretty well. This was like one of the best quarterback performances that the Raiders have had all year. And then Brock Bowers became just the 3rd rookie tight end ever to go over 1,000 yards in this game. Already the best tight end in the league.
There'll be debate next year about Bowers versus McBride. Who would you rather have in fantasy? Obviously, a big part of that is going to be who's the Raiders quarterback. But I think it's an interesting discussion for sure. Obviously, the touchdown regression should be coming next year for Trey McBride, but Bowers has been absolutely sensational. Let's go to the Chargers here. Huge comeback win for them on Thursday Night Football over the Broncos. Miracles do happen in this Christmas season. Gus Edwards, a 43-yard run for Gus Edwards, and scores 2 touchdowns. Evan, what do you think of Chargers' comeback win over the Broncos?
I think that Justin Herbert absolutely cooked in this game, and I thought that there was legitimate reason for worry entering this game about him. He was dealing with all kinds of injuries, like around his like feet, and banged his knee, and he's got that plantar fasciitis, and he had really stopped running, and he just all of a sudden, boom, he's back to like being an unbelievable player. The matchup with Denver didn't look good on paper, and he had an unbelievably awesome game, comeback win for the Chargers. I am interested to see, because I think that J.K. Dobbins is now eligible to come off of IR. I have not heard even a peep about him. Have you heard anything?
The practice window has been open, so they're giving him a chance. It doesn't mean that he's going to play, but I haven't heard what's going to happen. I think they're going to get a look at it and see. They could certainly use him if he's healthy. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And they play the Patriots this week, and so very good spot for the running backs no matter what. Last note I had on Chargers, Ladd McConkey, the volume hasn't been like ideal in a lot of these games, but 120.4 passer rating for Justin Herbert when targeting Ladd McConkey. That leads all rookies. I mean, Ladd has been an awesome player this season.
Another guy who's been a fairly critical component of their passing game is Will Dissly. He's missed the last, 2 or 3 games with a shoulder injury. They could really use him with the long week, the mini bye. They could really use him returning here against New England.
Let's go to the Dolphins. So no Jalen Waddle here. And so, if Tyreek Hill had anything left in the tank, I thought it was a really good spot for him. He had some crazy drops, like drops you do not see Tyreek Hill have. He also had an end zone target where he was pretty open. Ball got tipped at like the very last second. Tyreek still maybe could have made the play, but didn't. And so Tyreek ends with 329-1 on 7 targets. There's going to be a lot of talk this offseason. Is Tyreek Hill completely cooked? It's certainly scary right now, especially after the failure here in this game without Jalen Waddle. Evan, what do you think of Dolphins win over the 49ers?
Yeah, and Tyreek after the game blamed it on lack of practice reps with Tua. He's like, I need to stop taking veteran rest days. The wrist injury, I guess, is still a thing. But, yeah, I mean, Devon Achane, we've talked about how all season he was missing those big, long runs, and we got him here. So he had a monster game, finished with 23 touches, 190 yards from scrimmage, and a touchdown. I think that he was the biggest story of this game.
Yeah, I mean, Achane, they line him up as a wide receiver, and he runs routes deep down the field. I mean, it's crazy. And obviously a lot of his catches come short area, but they do ask him sometimes to run actual wide receiver routes. It's just a special player. Yeah, Tyreek will be 31 in March, and so you got to weigh all that stuff. Malik Washington with Jalen Waddle out, 32 routes on 36 dropbacks. So he was out there. And he was playing. Wasn't able to hit any explosive plays, not a lot of design stuff, but he was at least out there heading into a Week 17 game at the Browns. Dolphins are still alive, like 8 or 9%, but Dolphins are still alive. Patriots go into Buffalo, and honestly, they controlled a lot of the game, especially in the first half. I mean, Patriots were up 14-0 in the second quarter, end up losing 24-21. I know I say it every week, but there's going to be a lot of confidence from Patriots fans, from fantasy people in Drake May heading into next season. I mean, I think he has looked very good in very poor circumstances in terms of pass catcher and offensive line. So I'm excited for year 2 Drake May, pending what they put around him. Evan, what do you think of Patriots game up there in Buffalo?
Yeah, I mean, the story continues to be Drake May, he's not only been really good in real life, he's been pretty solid in fantasy. He has not had like a huge game yet, but I think that those are definitely in his future. His game is, I think, similar to Josh Allen. And obviously he is well far ahead of where Josh Allen was when Josh Allen came out of college in his rookie year. The other story is Ramondre Stevenson. My God, man, hang on to the football. He lost a fumble in this game. He lost another one, but it got charged to Drake May. And then after the game, Gerard Mayo was talking about how it might be time to bench him for Antonio Gibson. The thing is, Antonio Gibson is like an error-prone guy himself. But Ramondre Stevenson has 7 fumbles on the year.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I haven't really played Ramondre Stevenson much this year. I'll be watching this story though to see if we can get a cheap Antonio Gibson through here against the Chargers, even though it would not be that exciting. Hunter Henry, 9 more targets here. Hunter Henry now has 8+ targets in 6 of his last 9 games. I mean, he has been a featured player even as they've used Austin Hooper a bunch here in 2 tight end sets. Jets. This was back to the Jets that we've seen for most of the season. Massively underperforming expectation. Home game against a leaky Rams defense, and the Jets score 9 points. Aaron Rodgers throws it 42 times, leads to just 256 passing yards. So this was kind of, the total got way up there. People are like, oh, he's back. We're going to get 47, 48 points out of this Jets-Rams game, and then just falls flat. Evan, what do you think of Jets game against the Rams?
Yeah, they had this was one of the highest total games on the slate at 47. And we got a big, this is really disappointing. The Jets, so, they signed Tyron Smith in the offseason, and they drafted Olu Fashanu. And Tyron Smith is done for the year. Olu Fashanu with their first-round pick. He'd been playing pretty well. He'd been committing too many penalties, but he was playing pretty well on Aaron Rodgers' blind side, and he suffered a broken foot. So they're going to be digging into their depth deep at left tackle the rest of the way. Garrett Wilson looks like he's going to be the squeaky wheel. He's talking about how he needs the ball more. He obviously needs the ball more. Another stat, Allen Lazard has 9 drops this season on 54 targets. He is dropping 17% of passes intended for him. He's horrible.
I mean, on the Garrett Wilson thing, it's just hard for me to see Aaron Rodgers turning his back on Devontae Adams, just feeding Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams every week is getting 10, 11 targets. That's kind of what the fear was for Garrett Wilson when they did the deal. It's like Aaron Rodgers loves Devontae Adams, especially around the goal line. He's going to throw to him a ton. So I don't know how much I buy the sticky wheel, but Garrett Wilson certainly deserves better. Last note I had on the Jets was the running back split. The Jets have been eliminated from the playoffs, and the split is getting wider than it was when they were contending for the playoffs. Breece Hall, 53 snaps here. Isaiah Davis, 10. Braylon Allen, 10. And Breece Hall has this knee injury. It's like you're dead, and you're still not getting looks at Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen here at the expense of Breece Hall. So notable, I think. Steelers lost in Baltimore in that Saturday game, again without George Pickens. And you see how bad the offense struggles without George Pickens. Like, it's really hard for them to generate offense when their top targets are Calvin Austin, Jalen Warren, Pat Freiermuth, Van Jefferson, junk like that. They are expected to get George Pickens back for this game against the Chiefs tomorrow, which will be good for the offense as a whole. Evan, what do you think of Steelers' loss in Baltimore last week?
Yeah, George Pickens is not even on the injury report, so he's going to be good to go against Kansas City. That's the biggest note that I have. The Jalen Warren outsnapped Najee Harris, but the game script can affect that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, George Pickens, most valuable wide receiver in the league, will be back this week.
Yeah, when they get behind, Jalen Warren's a great play in fantasy. They get behind, they start using Jalen Warren a ton more in the pass game, and he can be very profitable there on the 2-game slate. Is an interesting play, I think, if you play it to Chiefs playing well. Last thing we're going to do here today is the Tennessee Titans. So the Mason Rudolph start era, whatever you want to call it, it's underway, and it wasn't good. They go to Indy. They fall behind 31-7 to the Titans in Indy. Then they start racking up some stats in garbage time. I think the big story for fantasy is Chig Okonkwo. I mean, Chig Okonkwo now has 10 targets in week 15 and 11 in week 16. Now, a lot of that is garbage time, but when you play for the Titans, you're going to get a lot of garbage time. So the Chig stuff is at least interesting to me. Evan, what do you think of him and any other Titans thoughts?
Yeah, I liked them going into this game.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit shaky on them because it's never, it's hard to be confident about a guy like Chig Okonkwo who's used in that way. Will often, I mean, remember last year he had, well, as a rookie, he had like an unbelievable yards per route run, and then that just went away last year. And now new coaching staff, his usage has been up and down over the last 2 weeks. Though he has been a target volume monster, and we know that he's got the athleticism, and I think that he's got a legit rapport with Mason Rudolph. So I think that we can have a level of confidence in him, certainly going up against Jacksonville.
Yeah. A little bit disappointing for Calvin Ridley here. Only saw 5 targets in this game, 14.5% share for Calvin Ridley, which is just weird. Like he's got to get the ball more given what's around them. So yeah, playing the Jaguars here, it'll be thinner, but a revenge game for Calvin Ridley, and still have optimism that all these guys are better off with Mason Rudolph than Will Levis. All right. That is going to do it for this Week 17 Championship Week edition of the Team by Team Show. I know you're wondering, you're thinking, will this show continue now that the fantasy season is about to be over? Yes, of course. Team by Team will continue next week for Week 18, big DFS week in Week 18. And then we will go team by team in the playoffs, but only for the teams that are still alive. So we'll keep doing the Team by Team show through the playoffs, but they'll be shorter and shorter as we go, as we'll only be talking about teams that are still in the mix. For Evan, producer Ryan, producer Luke, I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.